Brave New World is a fantastic parable about the dehumanization of human beings. In the negative utopia described in my story, man has been subordinated to his own inventions. Science, technology, social organization, these things have ceased to serve man. They have become his masters.
Aldous Huxley's novel portrays a dystopian future under the dictatorship of a world state, where every aspect of human life is controlled, from laboratory creation to the grave. He described the story as fantasy, but later wrote, "The prophecies made in 1931 are coming true much sooner than I thought they would. The nightmare of total organization has emerged and is now awaiting us, just around the next corner."
With the rise of brain-computer interfaces and biometric sensors and so forth, all the bodies, all the brains would be connected together to a network, and you won't be able to survive if you're disconnected from the net.
All life on Earth is going to be radically changed.
It's a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological world. It's changing who we are.
These people have gotten to the point now where they are openly anti-human.
Everything will be monitored. The environmental consequences of every human action.
They cannot happen without digital ID.
Once the digital ID is in place, it's game over for humanity.
The ideology of a world dictated through science is deep-rooted. Almost a century ago, a movement was established in the United States, preaching that the population should be governed by an elite of selected experts, scientists and academics, rather than democratically elected politicians. They called it technocracy.
These engineers and scientists from Columbia University promoted what they thought was going to be the replacement for capitalism and free enterprise. It's not going to be price-based economic system. It's going to be based on resources and energy, control over energy. They thought that science was the answer for everything. They didn't have any spiritual bone at all. You know, they were very mechanistic in their thinking.
The definition was clear.
Technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population.
The movement was short-lived, but the principle never died. As we'll demonstrate, a stranglehold on policy and resources has always been the ambition of the powerful oligarchs behind many of today's world institutions.
It seems to me that there's a very strong drift in the direction of globalization, of the ultimate centralization of control in the hands of unelected officials at supranational organizations. The lust to control other human beings is a story as old as time.
They want all of the resources of the world in their pocket. They do not want you and me to have anything. It's in writing all over the World Economic Forum's website. By 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. That's an oxymoron. If you don't have anything in your name, you ain't going to be happy about it.
The World Economic Forum may have called that infamous phrase a prediction, but it translates as a statement of intent on behalf of its global power brokers.
The bigger picture is that an attempt is underway now to collapse liberal democracy and replace it with global technocracy. What I call an omni-war is now underway, which is to say that the transnational ruling class is literally, it's not a metaphor, is literally at war with the rest of humanity and has weaponized everything that it can.
This is a coup. They can remove the power from the parliament and the legislative branch and consolidate it into a monetary system which has complete control.
That control is now entirely achievable because the would-be controllers finally have the tools to execute it. Total surveillance, artificial intelligence, digital IDs, and central bank digital currencies.
The potential for social control is gigantic and potentially irreversible.
What our experts are describing is a world commanded by an exclusive group of bankers and industrialists, affecting every aspect of our lives. What we eat, what we can buy, where we travel, where we live, and all bypassing democratically elected governments. You could be forgiven for thinking this is a grand conspiracy theory, but please consider this.
The term conspiracy theory has become one of the most successful propaganda terms of all time in closing down discussion and debate. It's a thought-terminating cliche, but nevertheless, it's surprisingly effective when you try to calmly present evidence in a factual and reasoned manner.
In this film, we will present evidence that the global takeover is not only possible, it's actually happening, and has been decades in the making. They plan to commandeer land, reduce farming, and radically change the food we eat, transform the supply of electricity, and then dictate how we use it, and replace currency with a system of credits, under their control. It's a classic template. To win the war, take control of food, of energy, and of money. And here's the key. All three strategies are built on the premise of a climate crisis caused by carbon dioxide, a gas that is actually vital for life on the planet. So what if the whole carbon narrative was one gargantuan lie? A political maneuver to establish their brave new world.
A big lie is a lie which is told on such a scale that ordinary people simply would not imagine it to be possible.
People with empathy can't fathom that a group of people would organize and engineer this kind of mass atrocity to get where they want to go.
It should come as no surprise that financial kingpins are calling the shots. And it's certainly no conspiracy theory when banking executives spell out their intentions.
We are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new accounting is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having an almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens.
We are shifting to a new financial system, but the general population is not shifting to a new financial system. It's shifting to a control grid.
CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contracts, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations, and also we will have the technology to enforce that.
They're saying we can control with rules. We don't need currency anymore. And so it's no longer a financial system or a currency system. It's purely a digital concentration camp. It's a slavery system.
When Catherine Austin Fitts talks, we should listen. She's a former high-level investment banker in New York and held senior office in the first Bush administration in Washington.
There may be 1,000 models of how it could work. But essentially, you will have, whether it's a banking account or a credit card, and it can be turned off and on. So my incentive system is not you go to work and work hard and you get money. My incentive system can be based on how you behaved in the last 5 minutes, on a 24/7 basis.
CBDCs, as the name suggests, would be issued by central banks like the Federal Reserve in America and the Bank of England, not by high street banks. They would signal the end of cash, and every transaction you make would be transparent and held on a permanent database. Crucially, under a net zero regime, your carbon footprint could be at the heart of the system.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker.
This can be the infrastructure for a carbon credit system. It's totalitarian control, and if people don't become aware of it now, it's going to be too late to backtrack from this. It's a ratchet system where it's very difficult, if not impossible, to backtrack.
But why is now the time for change?
Because the system is in crisis. It entered crisis in 2019. Mark Carney, he talked quite openly about how the international monetary and financial system had entered profound crisis and was effectively on its last legs.
If you study the history of how the central bankers designed technocracy, essentially when they created the Fed, they said, look, this can't last forever. We're going to need, at some point somebody's going to get hip to this game. We're going to need another system. And I will say this, because I used to be part of that, I was born and bred to be a central banker. They plan ahead hundreds of years in advance.
Predictably, the money brokers seem to hold all the cards. As a subtext, does the ruling class need to protect itself as artificial intelligence threatens mass unemployment? And what will happen to our existing assets if the banking system is collapsed and money disappears overnight? In an unknown future, one thing is certain. Digital IDs are essential to the project. If they become compulsory, data on every detail of our lives will be monitored, stored, and monetized. Nothing, but nothing, would be private.
For younger people, often it's the case that they like technology, they're completely au fait with it, they enjoy it. So they don't see the dangers that technology can bring because, like a drug dealer does, you feed people, low levels of drug where it's all fun. And then later, when you have them addicted, you feed the hard stuff and that destroys their life. So in a similar way, all of this technology is currently pretty much nice, but when the central bank digital currency comes in and the control comes in and the censorship systems, then the younger people will realize all too late in many cases that they've walked themselves into a trap.
One man who knows the dangers only too well is Aman Jabi, who was at the forefront of digital development in Silicon Valley, California, for 25 years. He left when he recognized the dark side of surveillance technology, choosing instead the peace and beauty of Montana. He's an expert in facial recognition.
It's a technique that is used to uniquely identify the biometrics of any face. So, in a device like your smartphone, and most modern smartphones in the last 5 or 7 years, they have a 3D camera module in the front of the phone which you cannot see. Within that module is a near-infrared projector which projects tens of thousands of dots on your face. Those dots are then distorted based on the contours and the features of your face, and there's a near-infrared camera then takes a picture of that distortion, captures it, and then reverse engineers the exact profile of your face. In the longer term, facial recognition will be used to unlock your digital identity, which is going to be a tool of control for the agendas that are coming down the pipeline.
Elements of that control are already with us.
Alexa, good morning. Good morning.
You are never alone in your home, and this is why. All your devices at home and all smart appliances, they are all connected on a wireless network. Many of these devices will have cameras, many will have microphones, and so they are monitoring everything all the time. Your smart appliances are communicating with the smart meter and sending it real-time usage data. If there's a Ring camera also in your home, a mesh network is formed and all your devices are being tracked within the home, its location, its usage, and all the data is going to Amazon servers. When you leave your home, all modern vehicles are connected to the internet, so your automobile is being tracked all the time. When you're going under a string of smart LED poles and smart LED lights on the highway and in the streets of your towns and cities, those form a wireless network and are tracking your vehicle. They are tracking all the devices on you, from smartphones to smartwatches when you're walking on the streets. So data is being collected 24/7 continuously on every human being whenever you are within these wireless networks.
And it's obviously not good for health also because of all the electromagnetic radiation.
In the long term, the plan is to pretty much lock up humanity in smart cities, which is kind of a superset of a 15-minute city.
They've sold all the state and local governments and countries that smart cities are about sustainability and the good of the city. But in reality, the language from the UN and WEF and their white papers is all inverted. So, air monitoring is really about limiting mobility and no car ownership. Right? Surveillance, control via LED grid is why the smart lighting is there. Water management is about water rationing, noise pollution is about speech surveillance, traffic monitoring is about limiting mobility, and then, of course, energy conservation is all about rationing heat, electricity, and gasoline. Another concept one should be familiar with is called geofencing, and think of it as an invisible fence around you where you cannot go beyond a certain point, and that will be related to your face recognition, digital identity, and access control. Your smart contracts, SoftBrick can turn off your digital currency beyond a certain point from your house. Our world has been turned into a digital panopticon.
That means you can be monitored, analyzed, managed, and monetized.
Surveillance capitalists are already making billions of dollars selling our information to big corporations, because this kind of detailed knowledge enables them to predict and influence our behavior. Worse, our children are being exploited.
There are a lot of board games and other games that are already in the market and have been for over 2 years that have cameras inside and underneath these LED screens that are observing and scoring and emotionally calibrating the faces of all the children. So are all the iPads that they use in schools. They're all manipulating children's behavior by what they display on the screens. And child data is big business. There's a concept called social impact investing, which people should read up on. If your kids are in schools, they are already being traded on Wall Street in real time. They can bet on groups of kids whether they're going to be successful or not, whether they're going to become computer scientists or environmental engineers.
So children have become essentially a commodity and have been for years with this system. And once it's fully in place, it is going to be used to fully control the behavior of children as well as how they behave with respect to, diversity, equity, inclusivity, etc.
The Chinese have already gone one step further.
Classrooms have robots that analyze students' health and engagement levels. Students wear uniforms with chips that track their locations. There are even surveillance cameras that monitor how often students check their phones or yawn during classes. These sensors pick up electrical signals sent by neurons in the brain. The neural data is then sent in real time to the teacher's computer.
We've been drawn into this digital spy network in the name of convenience, connectivity, safety, and especially entertainment. The 3D world of cyberspace creates virtual lives that are often more exciting than reality.
Why is this technology being developed? It's all for the culmination of this digital prison from which there will be no escape after all the switches are turned on.
The critical switch would be the introduction of those digital IDs and central bank financial control, a world of zero trust.
Zero trust is based on a simple principle.
Never trust, always verify.
Zero Trust is a protocol that is implemented by cybersecurity companies. And what it really means is we don't trust you, and you have to prove who you are all the time, 24/7. So think of it as going from a world of implicit allow to default deny. In tomorrow's world, once Zero Trust is implemented in, say, retail, everything will be behind plexiglass doors with a 3D camera, and it'll only be unlocked through your digital identity and facial recognition if you have the available carbon credits in your digital currency.
If you've reached the limit of your allowance, it could be access denied. This would apply to fuel, to travel, to meat and dairy products, to clothes and other consumer goods. Because everything in life could be valued by its carbon footprint. Even access to the internet could be denied.
So the new world of Zero Trust is really a world of locks. It's like an inverted prison. You are supposedly free to roam about, but everything you want to access is behind lock and key.
Most advances in science, including AI, bring great advantages to the world. They can enhance and improve human endeavour in almost every walk of life. But you don't have to be a scientist to see the flip side.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now, the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
If you think this couldn't happen in the West, ask yourself why so many cameras, smart poles, and 5G networks are being installed in your neighbourhood. In London, the police are using facial recognition surveillance. Sainsbury's is already experimenting with AI.
Thank you for waiting. The cabinet will now be opened.
In UK railway stations, surveillance is being tested to collect travellers' data. And in Oxford, these barriers were installed by the council under its so-called 15-minute city plan. They were removed following protests. But look at what's replacing them in these quiet residential streets. As the tech companies are proud to tell us, the possibilities are endless.
We've developed the camera into a sensor. The camera does not only capture video, it can now start to count, measure, and detect. With deep learning capability, the camera is able to generate accurate and trustworthy data and send notifications in order to take action, all directly from the camera. And since our cameras have open technology, well, we can work with different analytic partners from all over the world and together do just about anything we want.
Note that they can do just about anything they want.
Digital technologies mainly have an analytical power. Now we go into a predictive power. But then the next step could be to go into a prescriptive mode, which means you do not even have to have elections anymore, because we know what the result will be.
Ultimately, we're facing manipulation by the system. A world where instead of us using technology, technology is using us. But who's really pulling the strings? Banking and oil dynasties like Rothschild and Rockefeller inevitably get mentioned, as do the modern-day big tech masters, including the ubiquitous Bill Gates. David Hughes takes a wider view.
It's those who own the means of production, who are capable of magicking money out of thin air, who control the media, and all of the other means of production, which have now been weaponized against the rest of the global population.
Catherine Austin Fitz, the banking insider, adds a sinister thought.
If you know their name, they're not at the top.
Either way, it's a story of power, money, and manipulation by a small group of people who share common interests. and a belief that the world needs top-down control for maximum efficiency. As we'll see, it could result in the destruction of the farming industry in favour of laboratory foods, and a shortage of electricity because of the race to net zero.
Net zero means the impoverishment of ordinary people. It means fundamental changes to their lifestyles, and the politicians are not being honest with the people about it.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sights.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious programme for a perfect world. And who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.